This hour, Mark Holbrook.
Call me what you want, but I think I represent common sense.
Shelley Pingree.
I will work with anybody who's in the White House and anybody else who's in Congress.
Head to head. From Maine's total weather and news, the issues impacting Maine, the country, and the world. Commitment 2016, the first congressional district debate. Here's WMTW political reporter Paul Merrill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us for tonight's debate. We're coming to you live from the Westbrook Performing Arts Center at the Westbrook Middle School. Tonight we'll be talking about some of the most important issues facing the state of Maine and our nation and the world, really. Each candidate will get 1 minute to answer each question, and I will be allowing 30-second rebuttals at my discretion. We have a live audience. Our audience members have agreed not to clap or make any sort of distracting noise tonight so we can hear the most from our candidates. Neither candidate has seen any of the questions beforehand. Our audience members had the opportunity to submit some questions on their way into the auditorium. And those of you watching at home, we invite you to participate by tweeting us your own questions for the candidates. Use the hashtag WMTWDebate or post your questions on our Facebook page. My colleague Megan Torgeson is here. She's monitoring social media and she'll be asking the candidates some of your questions. We're going to begin with 1 minute long opening statements. We're here with Congresswoman Pingree and Dr. Holbrook. The Congresswoman won the coin toss and elected to go second, so the first opening statement goes to you, Dr. Mark Holbrook.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate you moderating this and putting this on for us. This is a big opportunity for the people of CD1 to be able to see the differences between the two candidates here. I've been engaged in this campaign for 20 months. This has been the longest job interview I've ever been on. I'm running for Congress because I'm part of the 71% of Americans who believe the ruling class in Washington has taken the country in the wrong direction. The PC police have kept us so beat up that we're now timid to offer a Merry Christmas greeting to our neighbors. Our religious freedom is under attack, and they want to take our guns away under the false pretense of reducing violence. Unlike the ruling class, I believe the Constitution of the United States is the law of the land and not a work in progress, and I expect that we're going to abide by it. I'm going to work to restore the American dream, and I'll begin by popping the bubble that surrounds the ruling class, that protects them and shields them from the rest of us. I'll work to bring good jobs, good paying jobs to Maine. I'll work to get rid of the job killer called Obamacare. And I'll work to secure our nation's borders and bring accountability to the bureaucratic behemoths like the IRS and the VA.
Your 1 minute's up. Thank you, Dr. Holbrook. Congresswoman Pingree, opening statement.
Well, thank you very much to Channel 8 for having us here tonight. Thank you to Mark for doing this and for running, and to everyone here in the audience and at home watching, thank you very much. I've been very privileged to represent the 1st Congressional District of Maine, and I'm here tonight to ask the voters to give me that opportunity again. I believe this is going to be a very critical year for our country. I think almost everyone I know says, please get this election over, and I'm with you on that one. But I think after this election, who represents us in Congress and the United States Senate and who's in the White House is going to be very important. I believe that I have worked hard to represent the district. The 1st Congressional District has a very diverse group of residents, from fishermen to farmers to people who live in our urban areas to our rural communities. And I've tried to focus on the issues that are most important to us, making sure there are good jobs here in Maine, helping to support the rural economy through agriculture and other opportunities, trying to bring down the cost of education, making sure that there's universal access to health care for everybody in our country and everyone in this state. And I hope I get the chance to continue on working on those issues and many more in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you both for agreeing to be here and be part of the discussion. Our first question has to do with a very important issue, jobs in the economy, and it comes from a CD1 voter. Listen up.
Hi, I'm Peter Ironman from Portland, Maine, and I'd like to know what you're going to do to increase economic development in the state of Maine and to provide more jobs for people throughout the state.
Increase economic development. Congresswoman Pingree, will go to you first.
Well, it's a very critical issue in our state, and I think Maine has really been tragically affected by some of the losses in jobs, and particularly in the manufacturing sector over the last decade and more. Just today, we saw the closure of another machine at a paper mill, and we've seen a tragic loss of paper industry in the last couple of years. All members of the delegation have been putting an effort into figuring out what else we can do to support our paper industry, create new markets, but it's much bigger than that. In Maine, we have to think about how to make sure we support affordable education. So many of the new jobs of the future require either a 2- or a 4-year degree. We have to make that affordable to our young people. We have to support entrepreneurship. Just a couple of weeks ago, my office held a forum for women who want to get involved in businesses. Some of them who are already in business, some of them who want to expand their business or start new ones, making sure that they have the support that they need. And of course, I've worked really hard on the rural economy. I think there are great opportunities, whether it's fishing or farming here in our state, making sure that we continue to grow the number of farms, to create those opportunities that people are seeing already. I could go on for a long time, but I'm out of time, and we'll, I'm sure, get a chance to answer that again.
Dr. Holbrook, if elected, how would you help increase economic development in the district?
That's probably the #1 question I've heard in the last 20 months going around the district is what are we going to do about the economy in Maine? The GDP for Portland has been virtually flat for the entire 7 years that Congresswoman Pingree's been in office. I will be a big cheerleader for the state of Maine. As soon as I'm in office, I'll get on the list of the Fortune 500 companies and start calling them. And I will say, what do you need to bring your company or part of your company here to Maine? I'll lock arms with Congressman Poliquin, and the two of us will go after these companies and say, what do you need to come to Maine? We will go up to the governor's office and sit down with the governor and say, we have companies X, Y, and Z ready to come to Maine. We have to get to work to make this happen. We'll go to the state legislature and say, we are ready to go on this. Let's all get on board, start pulling the oars in the same direction, and bring these jobs to Maine.
All right, I want to remind our audience watching at home, you can submit questions by using the hashtag WMTWDebate on Twitter or post them to our Facebook page. Our next question, we're going to start with Dr. Holbrook, and this also has to do about trade. You guys are both against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP. It's a trade deal negotiated among 12 Pacific Rim countries, including the United States, but excluding China. It's become a flashpoint in this election cycle because opponents say ratifying the deal would hurt the U.S. manufacturing industry, but supporters of TPP say the United States cannot sit out a partnership like this one for both economic and humanitarian reasons. So our question is, would any changes to the Trans-Pacific Partnership deal make it more palatable to you? Why or why not? Dr. Holbrook, we start with you.
It wouldn't. I mean, 80% of the TPP is about immigration, and it's not about trade. And based on our history, this country's history of negotiating trade deals, we've done a pretty poor job of it. We have a $500 billion trade deficit annually in this country. That is dragging our economy down. We have got to be able to make better deals that are going to support Americans. You know, one of the things that we can change to improve the economy has to do with a statutory tax rate of 35%. Let's cut that down to 15%, and let's keep our companies here. We also have $2.1 trillion offshore. American companies are hoarding $2.1 trillion. We have to be able to pave a pathway for them to bring that money back into this country without being punished for doing so. That'll be a huge asset to this economy.
Thank you. Congresswoman Pingree, could any changes to TPP make you change your position on it?
Well, I've been opposed to TPP. I've been opposed to other trade agreements since I've served in Congress. And even back when I wasn't in Congress, but when Congress passed NAFTA, I had a fear that it would not be helpful to the state of Maine, and I think we've learned over the last 2 decades it hasn't been. We've seen a tremendous loss in industry in our state, whether it was in the shoe manufacturing, textile manufacturing. We've lost a lot in our lumber and forest products industry, and now paper seems to be disappearing at all too fast of a rate. I've joined in, since I've been in Congress, in supporting some of the claims against China on currency manipulation, on dumping of things like paper or steel into our economy, and other unfair trade practices. Frankly, I'm not sure if we could craft a good trade agreement. We're often told, each agreement that comes down, that we're told, oh, this is going to be a good one. This one is going to look a lot better than the last one. But even when people claim it's a good deal, we've had very little enforcement. And the way I look at this, it's been problematic, not only to manufacturing, it's been problematic in the agriculture sector. This new deal has a lot of concerns around agriculture, around prescription drug pricing. It's just got a host of problems, and I'm not sure we could get it right.
All right, we have basically two national security questions. One is kind of a big picture one, and Congresswoman, we'll start with you. And just broadly, what is the biggest national security threat in our country now, and how do we tackle it?
Well, we have quite a few, but I actually think one that we talk about the least, but that has very broad implications, is around cybersecurity. The fact that so much of our lives today are connected to the internet, whether it's through your car, through your smartphone, or much bigger picture things, the grid, the electronic grid, our communication system, your air control system. There are so many things, and the worries about a foreign power having nefarious purposes and doing damage to any one of those systems, I think keeps a lot of people up at night. We get frequent security briefings as a member of Congress, and of course we can't repeat all the details, but the ones on cybersecurity are sometimes the most frightening because they're the kinds of things that we are so dependent on today, whether it's our economy, our safety systems. There's just so much of our lives that is tied into the internet, and we see random hacking of emails and political campaigns or banking challenges that go on. We see a lot of them, but what we don't see is perhaps more frightening. I don't want to leave us with the idea that that's the only issue. I mean, there's ISIS, there's the challenge that's going on in Syria. There are all kinds of terrorism threats and other things that are equally as important, but I think cybersecurity often doesn't get enough attention.
Dr. Holbrook, what's our biggest national security threat, and how would you deal
I think
with
the
it?
most immediate threat is our southern border. We have to be able to secure it. At this point right now, we have a very porous border, and we don't know who's coming in that way. We don't know what they're bringing. They could be bringing in radioactive material to be building a dirty bomb. 75% of illicit drugs in this country come through that southern border. We have to be able to secure that first. Now, cybersecurity is a big problem. No question about that. The other problem has to do with refugees coming into this country. We're bringing refugees in that we can't vet. I mean, it is the typical Trojan horse. I mean, that is not just a fantasy. This is a serious problem with however many illegal aliens we have here. The common number that people seem to agree on is 11 million. If it's 11 million, I'm cynical enough to think that it's probably 20 million. I see that we're out of time, but
I want to drill down. I'm gonna try to keep this as even as possible, but I want to drill down. We talked a lot about what the issues are, but if I could give you each 30 seconds, and we'll start with the Congresswoman. How would you fix the cybersecurity threat?
Some of it is just resources, making sure that we have enough people, enough large enough entities with enough sort of brain power and technical ability, which we have a lot of people working on this already. But the fact is we have to make sure all the resources there, and we have to take it seriously. I think, again, it's not something that Congress has been willing to invest enough money in, and I think there isn't always enough expertise in sort of understanding what the next problem is going to be. We know a little bit about who the most likely challenging actors are, who is the biggest threats to the United States, but we could use a lot more resources in that area.
Dr. Holbrook, about 30 seconds. How would you secure the southern border?
I've been on this campaign for 20 months. And from the get-go, I've been saying we need to build a wall from the Gulf of California to the Gulf of Mexico. Build a wall, dig a moat, put up a fence. I don't know what it is. We'll let the security experts decide that, but I am all for building the wall to be able to keep a physical barrier to keep people out so that we can actually control who's coming through the gates.
Our second set of national security questions, and Dr. Holbrook, we'll start with you. You've been critical of how the U.S. has responded to terrorist threats posed by ISIS and similar organizations, and you've talked about growing our military. So the question, would you support putting more American boots on the ground in places like Syria and Iraq to fight ISIS?
I'm not a military strategist. I would look towards the people who know best how to do this, and if that's their recommendation, I'd support them. One of the biggest problems this country has had since the end of World War II is that all of the wars, all of the conflicts have been dictated by the White House, by the Oval Office, and that's the last place we ought to be doing it. We have the finest military in the world. We have the finest military minds working for us. We should just say to them, here's the mission, let us know what you need to accomplish it, and to have the executives stay out of the problem, stay out of the process, and just let them feed us information and let us know when it's all done.
Congresswoman, I believe you were on the Armed Services Committee for a time. More boots on the ground in that part of the world?
Well, it's really challenging, and I think the United States finds itself in a very frustrating situation. Everyone hates to watch the pictures of Syria, to hear the news reports, to understand the difficulties that people are suffering there in the humanitarian crisis as well as military crisis. But we've just been through 2 major wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Over $3 trillion has been spent, a tremendous loss of lives, and we still haven't solved the problem yet. So I think there's a lot of fatigue on the part of the American public. The idea of sending boots on the ground in there or more military force faces a lot of resistance. It's not that anyone feels comfortable with the source of the challenge over there, but we're also concerned about investing in another big conflict like that and our ability to solve it. Our American military is strong, they're competent, they're good. Our resources are pretty well developed, and we've invested a lot in the last 2 wars. But at this particular moment in time, I think it's very difficult given the resistance the American public has to jumping into another war for us to just go over there with boots on the ground.
Paul,
Go ahead.
I'd
Yes.
like to respond to that.
Go ahead.
You know, that was pablum, and really didn't address any of the problems. Our friends around the world no longer respect us. Our enemies no longer fear us. Our military readiness is in deep question. When you have a wing of the Marine Corps and the pilots having to do their own mechanic work, to cannibalize their own planes in order to stay mission ready, that tells us that we are not where we need to be. And we have to do a whole lot more to fix that. And I still go back to the reason that there are so many problems in Iraq and Afghanistan is that the White House has tried to run the military.
Just to clarify.
Go ahead.
It's the United States Congress that has the ability to declare war, to end a war, and frankly, the Republicans in the House of Representatives have refused to take up a vote on whether or not we should be in some of the conflicts that we're in today. So it's not as if it isn't Congress's responsibility. The president hasn't taken it away from us. We, in particular with the Republicans in control, have been unwilling to take that particular vote. I still say we have a very competent military. We've invested a tremendous amount in the last conflicts. And it's true at times the people, our allies around the world look at the United States and say, do we have the same amount of respect that we did in the past? But some of it is their questions about, did we do the right thing going into Iraq? Did we have the right information? Did we give the American public the information that they just needed?
Time's up, Congressman.
Sorry.
Thank you.
The president is the commander-in-chief, and he's been dictating all along since he went in office how many boots on the ground we were going to have, when they were going in, when they were coming out. He's been dictating who they were going to set a drone on top of. The idea that you can blame this on Congress, I'm sorry, Representative Pinga, that's kind of shameful.
Well, I would also say
we
you
need to
can't.
go ahead.
Just
10 seconds.
Okay, 10 seconds. You can't say that the Pentagon hasn't been involved. I was on the Armed Services Committee, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. All of the brass from the Pentagon spends a lot of time informing Congress about what's going on and engaging them in the strategy as well.
Okay, I want to move on to a question about immigration. It comes from social media. My colleague Megan Torgerson is here with the question. Megan.
Good evening, candidates. Monitoring social media all evening. This question coming to us from Twitter. Peter Sillen asking this: Maine is aging and needs young people and workers, especially with skills. Should we turn such people away just because they are refugees? Dr. Holbrook, why don't you start?
Thank you. The idea that we're going to import non-Americans to in some way stimulate our labor force lacks any sort of rationale or reasoning to it. What we need to do is to create good jobs to keep our young people here. The problem with our aging population is that our young people are growing up, going to college, and then leaving Maine so that they can earn a living. The idea of importing more people is not the solution.
Congresswoman.
Well, I would just have to say I'm from a family of immigrants like many of us are. My grandparents were lucky enough to come from Norway and from Sweden and to find economic opportunities in this country. They started out as farmers and became a part of the economy, and that's true of so many of us. I think it's misguided to think that that isn't the pathway for engaging new citizens. It's a fact, and it comes from the Chamber of Commerce in the state of Maine, that unfortunately we don't have a workforce looking ahead because we're not having children in this state as fast as people are dying. We have one of the oldest populations in the nation. And we can't discount all immigrants, all refugees, all asylum seekers. So many of them come to this country because they're from a war-torn nation, because they can't live with the conditions that they've got, but they bring advanced degrees. They bring a sense of entrepreneurship, a desire to do hard work. It defies all logic to say, we don't want you to cross into our borders, somehow you're not welcome here. We were all welcome here into this country at one time or another, and we became part of a growing economy. It's unthinkable to think that we would say that to people who want to join us here in the state of Maine and be an important part of what our economic future looks like. It does not discount that, I mean, I have 3 kids. I want my kids to live here. I want them to have good jobs and be able to run their businesses in the state of Maine. It's not an either-or proposition. They don't take all of our jobs. They don't. They start new businesses. They're a wonderful addition to what we have in our state.
The question was not how do we engage with people from foreign countries. The question was about the economy and do we need to bring in refugees to stimulate our economy. And I'm saying no, we absolutely do not need to do that. And the idea that we are either welcoming or not welcoming to foreign people is not an issue. The question of refugees, now I have worked with many refugees in therapy sessions, and to a person, they were looking to come here to be safe. They were not looking to come here and to embrace the American culture. And now here, they were having a difficult time assimilating because this was not their home. I think it's inhumane to pull people up, uproot them from their homes, and bring them to a foreign country. What we ought to be doing, if we want to keep them safe, is keep them safe over there, not bring them over here.
We would absolutely prefer to keep people safe in their home country, and most people would prefer to stay in their home country. And we don't go bring them here. Generally, people who end up in the United States, as you said, are here because they're leaving a war-torn country, because their family's been killed in front of them, because they've faced some sort of challenges. The question is, are we going to be welcoming them when they're here? Do we understand that they're an important part of what our future looks like? Just like the Irish and the Italian and the Scandinavians and everyone else, the French Canadians who came to Maine became part of our culture, part of our economy, and we depend on this mixture of people today.
I'm amazed by your ability to just hit the play button and come up with the liberal patter. I mean, I'm really in awe of that. We aren't bringing the refugees over here. Yes, we are, and we're letting them in. And I'm saying we ought to stop that and keep them safe in their home countries where they want to be. I think that's more humane.
I'm happy to let the conversation breathe a little bit, but let's be mindful of the time as well. I want to move on to the topic of opioids. Obviously, this is an enormous problem in Maine and many other states. We're in the grips of a terrible heroin epidemic. And this question first goes to Congresswoman Pingree. You've pushed for federal funding to help fight this opioid problem in Maine. You sit on the Appropriations Committee, the committee that writes the budget. So what specific programs do you think should be funded, and where in the budget does that money come from?
So Congress passed a major piece of legislation this year, and I really appreciated the dialogue that went on before it and the fact that in the House of Representatives we pushed through, I think it's called CARA, but I can't exactly tell you what the acronym stands for, Comprehensive Addiction Recovery Act, something like that. And it's about $180-some million. And the idea was to make sure that this was funded in states throughout the country. And it had a little bit of everything: prevention, treatment, law enforcement, treatment of addicts in crisis situation. It's all in there. And one of the challenges is that the Republicans in the Congress have refused to fully fund it. I sit on the Appropriations Committee. We worked hard. We wrote letters. We encouraged our colleagues and said, it doesn't matter if you pass a comprehensive piece of legislation if the funding is not there, particularly in states like ours where this is an emergency level crisis, and we don't have enough resources here to deal with the scope of the problem. It's the appropriate time for the federal government to help us out.
Dr. Holbrook, the question for you about opioids is, you've referred to opiate addiction as a mental health issue, and you say it needs to be treated as such. So if elected, what steps would you be able to take right away to address the issue?
I've been a grant reviewer for SAMHSA for almost 7 years now, and I have yet to see a single RFP come across my desk looking at new evidence-based behavioral health treatments for addiction. And I think that is a problem that Congress can fix. We have a lot of very good research universities in this country that with the right funding could start working on that and help us with the treatment side of it. The law enforcement side of it, no question about it, that needs to be addressed. However, the DEA has 5,000 agents. There are more agents in Massachusetts than there are in all of Central America. Now, the drugs are being produced in South America. The Central American contingent of it is sort of the wholesale, and then they come across our border. 75% of illegal drugs coming across our border. We secure the border, that is going to impact our addiction problem. And then the third thing is prevention. We need to do research to get at the root of what the problem is. Nobody wakes up on any given morning and says, hey, I think it's a good idea to jam a needle in my arm filled with poison. That is not how it starts.
We're getting a lot of good questions on social media. We encourage you to keep tweeting at us and posting on our Facebook page. So our next question is going to come from social media, and Megan is here with that. Megan.
All right, Paul, thank you. This question coming from Bill Vincent. This was on our Facebook page where we are actually live streaming the debate. Bill Vincent says, what would you see as the best course forward with respect to the so-called Affordable Care Act, a piece of legislation some would see as legalized extortion? Representative Pingree.
Dr. Holbrook goes
Okay,
first.
Dr. Holbrook, you start.
Boy, that's a great way to characterize it. It needs to be repealed, and we need to make some changes in the whole system to fix it. There are lots of different things we can do to help people. One is, let's make insurance premiums fully tax deductible for the individual. That will help. Let's lower the tax threshold for being able to deduct medical expenses from 10% to 7.5%. A bill that was put forth in Congress that Congresswoman Pingree voted against. Let's expand the health savings accounts. Let's make it more competitive. Let's get the states out of the way so that insurance companies can compete across state lines. Now, there are two things about the Affordable Care Act that I like. It's just like a broken clock. It's right twice a day. One is the idea that dependent children can stay on their parents' insurance policy until they're 26. Given how long it's taking people to get through college, to get a good job and get stabilized, I think that makes good sense. The second one is we have to be able to have people be able to purchase new plans when they go to new jobs and not worry about pre-existing conditions.
Okay. Congresswoman, Affordable Care Act.
Right. Well, it's been really frustrating to watch the rates go up, and I both have an insurance plan and have employees on insurance plans, so I'm very sympathetic when people talk to me about this issue. Congress has voted over 60 times with the Republicans in control just to repeal it. Never to vote on a different plan or a better plan, but just to repeal it. And there's no way in our country after these last years that we could take that away from people. People really do need to have a plan that doesn't deny you because of a pre-existing condition. People like having a plan where your child can stay on the plan until they're 26 years old. Your insurance company wasn't about to give you that, and they won't if we just convert back to no possible way to do about doing this. I was a supporter of single-payer health care. Single-payer health care is a national plan. You don't have state by state. You'd have everybody covered under. If we couldn't have that, one of the things I think we need to do is go back talking about a public option. That gives you more competition in the marketplace. It's a federal plan. It's like expanding Medicare. Medicare is part of the law of the land today, and people depend on it. And it's a pretty workable system. The cost of prescription drugs is a huge issue, and we ought to be negotiating for those prescription drugs. They do it in every other Western nation. It would bring down the cost tremendously, and it would be very easy to add into our current plan.
I don't want to socialize our healthcare system. I don't want to socialize medicine. I don't want anything to do with single-payer options. The idea that Congress passed that bill and exempted themselves, have since changed it, but they exempted themselves, I find abhorrent to me. And congressmen, they make $174,000 a year. Their plans are subsidized by the taxpayer up to 75%. The median income in the state of Maine is only $39,000. I don't think this is right, and the ruling class is dictating all of this stuff down onto us, and that's why people are so mad today.
Congresswoman, when this passed, can you address those exceptions?
We absolutely are covered under the plan. We buy it in the exchange. We happen to buy it in the DC exchange because that's the way the federal law treats employees, but we're treated like every other federal employee. It doesn't matter if I was.
Was that always the case?
That was always the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
No,
There
it
might have been
wasn't.
early proposals that had
No, it
other
wasn't.
things.
You exempted unions, you exempted yourselves, you exempted the executive branch.
We never exempted unions. In fact, unions are still frustrated because they actually have to pay an extra tax because they have higher quality health care. So that's actually backwards.
But were Congress and the executive branch exempt? at all?
Absolutely
No.
not. No.
Let's go to our next question. It comes from our DC bureau. Sally Kidd, a reporter from our national bureau, filed this question for us. Listen up.
Across the country, we're seeing just how divided the electorate is, and we're seeing that in Maine as well. There's a lot of talk about the gridlock in Washington, but no clear path forward. And of course, it's going to take Republicans and Democrats working together to get something done. So in that spirit, which of your opponent's proposals do you agree with and would fight to see passed through Congress?
Congresswoman Pingree, that question goes to you first.
Mark's been Dr. Holbrook. Mark. You can call me Shelley.
Okay.
You've been very outspoken about mental health support. That's obviously a field you're very experienced in, you know a lot about. And I would support anything that brings us more mental health parity, that invests in programs that get people early care when they have mental health issues, that's there to support the system all along the way. I think that we should treat mental health issues exactly the same as we do physical health issues. We now understand much more about the connection between the two of them, and I wish we would invest more in that. And I know you've been proposing that since we've been debating.
Dr. Holbrook, which proposals of the Congresswoman would you fight for if elected?
Well, she hasn't mentioned this one yet this evening, but I know that Congresswoman Pingree has been a big supporter of farmers, and that runs deep in the marrow of my bones. I want, without farmers, we don't eat. And I want to be able to support farmers and the families that work them to be able to sustain them.
Our next question has to do with the big elephant in the room in 2016, the presidential election. We're going to start with Dr. Holbrook. We know you both, Congresswoman and Dr. Holbrook, you both support your party's respective nominees for president. We want to drill down a little bit more about those nominees. Dr. Holbrook, how do you square your support of Donald Trump with the comments he's made about women, the disabled, prisoners of war, Gold Star families, plus the allegations of sexual assault made against him?
Without going into my time, I want to file an official protest against Congresswoman Pingree. She gave me her cold 2 weeks ago, and I would like to give it back.
I take it back.
Okay.
And I want to acknowledge my responsibility for bringing the cold to the first debate.
Thank you.
We still want to talk about Donald Trump's
Yeah,
candidacy. though.
okay. What was the question?
How do you square your support of Donald Trump with the litany of things he's done that make a lot of voters uneasy?
So on one hand, we have a successful billionaire, and on the other hand, we have a member of the Clinton crime family. I'm going to go with a successful billionaire. Now, do I like everything the man has said? No. My daughter, when she was 12, she has been a part of my campaign since the beginning. In fact, she's the impetus for this. We were watching the debates, and when Mr. Trump and Marco Rubio were going back and forth at it, if I could have reached through that television and grabbed them by the neck, I'd have throttled both of them. I don't like it. There was a level of civility that we went down to that I would like to avoid ever doing again. But I still support the man and his programs. And if he isn't any good, we primary him out in 4 years and we get somebody else in.
Congresswoman, you've supported Hillary Clinton since she launched her campaign. Just on Friday, the FBI announced it's reopening its probe into her private email server. Given that email scandal, the questionable ethical practices of the Clinton Foundation, and the fact that the secretary has acknowledged both public and private positions, do you still trust her?
I do trust Hillary Clinton. I think that she is by far the most experienced, the most knowledgeable candidate we've ever had running for president, male or female, whether it was the work she did as a Secretary of State, as a state senator for her home state, building relationships across the aisle. She has an enormous amount of knowledge and skill and experience, and I think the country would be very well served. It's true, the email question came up again this week, and a lot of questions are being raised by why the head of the FBI would bring this up, whether there's actually anything in those emails. He already once reviewed them all and said there was nothing there. I think it's a terrible way to upend an election this close to the vote, but I continue to believe that the voters will say she's the best candidate, she's the right person to run this country, and she will be our next president.
Paul, my
Quickly, go ahead.
my candidate has a potty mouth. Her candidate is a criminal just waiting to go to jail. I mean, let's talk about Benghazi. You say that this woman is the most experienced candidate you've ever had. She has never done anything. She was a carpetbagging senator, and then she was appointed to Secretary of State, where she was a complete and abject disaster.
Just take the Benghazi, for instance. I mean, I was there in Congress. I think she was in front of that committee for 9 hours, 11 hours, answered every question straightforwardly, knew the answers, knew exactly what she would have done differently, and tried to change that tragic incident and the loss of lives. The committee itself spent, I think, $5 million. They've been on that for years and have not found a single thing that was criminal activity. So for people to call her a criminal and a liar, I mean, it feels sexist to me. It feels like we're not ready to approach having a woman president. But for whatever reason, people disagree with her. I still think it will be up to the American voters. It's certainly not up to me. And we'll find out what people think on Tuesday, Election Day.
She came out and lied, saying that that the Benghazi attack was the result of an internet video. And we know that within an hour of the attack, she was telling her daughter who it was, what happened, and why it happened. But she came out and lied to the American public, saying that it was an internet video. Let's talk about her emails and the classified documents. There are people behind bars today for having done much less. That woman should be in jail.
Let's move on, because I don't think either one of you is going to change the other's mind on the race for the White House. Our next question is a social media question, and Megan is going to bring us that question. Go ahead.
Paul, thank you. A lot of questions coming in about jobs and the economy. This one specifically relating to BIW. This comes in from Wyatt Thornton, who says, how do you plan to overcome the potential loss of jobs at BIW in the wake of the recent loss of a contract? And how do you plan to revitalize maritime trade in Portland?
Congresswoman, I think you're first this time.
Well, we're all very proud of Bath Iron Works here in the state of Maine. We like to say Bath built is best built. The Navy, I think, has a very high opinion of BIW, and they've been able to have a fairly steady stream of ships with the DDG 51s and the DDG 51,000, and 1000s. And they do incredible work there. They lost their contract, or their bid for a contract on the Coast Guard contract, and I was very sorry to see that. I think we all were. I don't know that the Coast Guard made the right decision. We've reviewed as much as we can about that, and I don't think there's any way that they can challenge it. But I do hope that BIW continues to try to diversify what they are doing there. The Navy is under a lot of constraints right now about the number of ships that they can build, but there is a real interest in Congress in continuing to build the size of our Navy, given the conflicts that people are seeing out into the future. So I hope that creates more opportunities for BIW. They have at times considered a variety of other things, whether it's being a part of building the turbines and wind towers that are being erected in Maine, or a variety of other things that are ways to transfer their skills. So I hope they continue to look into those things because we want to see that yard expand. If I thought we could do more to bring domestic shipping and domestic shipbuilding back into this country, I would be very much behind it, and I've continued to support the Jones Act to make sure that we do support domestic construction of ships.
Dr. Holbrook.
The idea that we could in some way incorporate Bath Iron Works to build wind turbines or domestic ships is understandable, but really naive, because neither one of those endeavors is going to employ the 5,500 workers that are there now. The workers who are at Bath Iron Works now build very complex ships, and it requires that level of manpower. Now, Congresswoman Pingree could help Bath Iron Works by occasionally voting to support a defense bill that has in its budget ships for the Navy and to allow them to build more ships. That would help. So my being elected, that's one of the ways that I'll certainly help Bath Iron Works, is I'll be able to support the defense budget.
To be clear,
yeah, go ahead.
I have occasionally, and more than occasionally, voted for both the Defense Authorization and the Defense Appropriations Bill. I serve on the Appropriations Committee, and I've lobbied hard to get the extra ship for BIW in this last cycle of funding. So it's not accurate to say I don't vote for them. I voted for this most recent one. I didn't vote for them in the beginning because I have a lot of concerns about funding for the war. So you have to understand that in Congress, a Defense Authorization Bill has a tremendous amount of components roots to it. And I got elected in 2008 with a very strong message from the people of the state of Maine saying, get us out of Iraq and Afghanistan, reduce the amount of money that we're spending, and I wanted to send that message back.
So your message is to put a stranglehold on our military by withholding the money. I don't think that is good foreign policy. I don't think that's good for national security, and I don't think that's good for any of the defense contractors in the state of Maine.
Can I just say that's an inaccurate statement? It was the Republicans who put the sequester in, which capped our military at a 5% increase. It was the Republicans who control the House of Representatives.
You just said you voted against that because you were trying to be mindful of the people who voted you in 2008.
And I said I did that in my early years, but I've done that. I voted for the last defense appropriations bill, the last defense authorization bill. One of the things about being in Congress is we're not machines. I don't have a liberal doctrine or a conservative doctrine, as you like to call it. I make a decision every time we take a vote on what's the best thing to do for my state, my constituents, and to send the message that I think is critically important to send.
I want to move on. We're going to do the ballot questions, which are, a lot of them are very important this year, have the potential to really dramatically affect the state of Maine. We know your positions on them, Congresswoman. I believe you're a yes on all 5. Dr. Holbrook, you are no on all 5. We want to drill down a little bit more. Dr. Holbrook, this first one goes to you. Ballot question 1 is, should Maine legalize recreational marijuana? We know that you are yes and no, respectively. So, Dr. Holbrook, the no vote, we want to know what you think the federal government should do as states begin to legalize recreational marijuana. If Maine were to do it, what role should the feds play?
I guess we'd try to put a stranglehold on the state of Maine to get them to turn that around. Because this particular bill, not only does it allow for recreational marijuana for adults, but on page 28, according to our Attorney General and the District Attorney of Cumberland County, it is going to legalize marijuana for minors. And I certainly don't support that. The human brain develops until age 25. And THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, is a teratogen to the developing brain. It destroys the human brain in ways that we can't turn back. It takes away motivation. It destroys short-term memory. There isn't anything about this bill that makes sense to the public. It's a health hazard, if anything.
Congresswoman, is question 1 a health hazard if it passes, and what should the federal government's role be?
Well, just to be clear, if it passes by a vote of the citizens of the state of Maine, it's the decision of the citizens of the state of Maine, but it will immediately go to the legislature where they will promulgate the rules, supply any laws about all restrictions around selling marijuana. It won't just be a free-for-all. And I would be shocked to think that the legislature would not apply laws that say there will be penalties for anyone who sells marijuana to minors, that there would be restrictions on its sale, how it's sold, how it's used. This doesn't allow for public use. I think there will be a lot of conditions around it. So I think it's not fair to say that it's an automatic occurrence. I don't agree with allowing young people to have access to marijuana, but I do think that we've ended up with a lot of people clogging up our jails, a lot of offenses that don't make any sense today, that put people behind bars for minor offenses around marijuana. And in fact, we could be regulating it, taxing it, just like the signs say. I've talked to a lot of my colleagues in Colorado. The revenues that are coming into municipalities, into their state, the regulations that they now have on it, have made a huge impact on their state. And I don't see why we don't do that here in the state of Maine.
So along with revenues going up, they also have increased traffic deaths.
I want to move through these because there are 5 of them, and I want to make sure we cover all of them and the other questions we have left. Congresswoman Pingree, ballot question 2 seeks to impose a 3% tax surcharge on income of more than $200,000 to help pay for public education. Won't that drive high-income earners out of Maine or prevent them from moving here in the first place?
Again, this is a decision that the voters are going to make. And I do think tax policy should be done by the legislature. It is a very tricky question about what the cap should be, what income level that this should kick in on, and what's the appropriate highest level of taxation for an income. And I understand why people are raising those concerns. We've got New Hampshire next door, and there are a lot of people who are going to move to a state where they don't have to pay income taxes. They're going to move to a state regardless because they don't want to pay any income tax. But I think this is there, and I think it may pass because the voters feel frustrated. They feel like people who are Big earners don't pay their fair share, and they feel like the state isn't doing enough to fund education. The state is mandated to pay 55% of the cost of education. I've served on a school board. I know a lot of people who are in communities where they are struggling to support even some of the basic costs of running a school today. So they're saying, why doesn't the state do more for us? And this referendum is there expressing the frustration that people feel, again, that some people don't pay their fair share in income tax and that there's not enough funding for education, which is so vitally important today.
Dr. Holbrook, would you support this initiative if that $200,000 limit were higher?
No.
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 It's not going to support education. It's going into the general fund. And what it's going to do is get people who are high income earners who want to come to New England. They're going to stop at New Hampshire because they can get a 10.15% pay increase just by staying in Portsmouth rather than coming across the river. This is foolishness. It's not going to help the schools. It's going to hurt our economy. It's going to help New Hampshire. And I don't think we need to do that.
Ballot question 3, and we'll start with you, Dr. Holbrook. The question seeks to expand background checks on more private firearms transfers. You oppose it. Why?
I oppose it because it's going to make criminals out of ordinary activities, people who engage in ordinary activities. Paul, if you want to go duck hunting tomorrow and you know that I have a particular shotgun, you want to try it before you buy your own, and you come over to my house and you say, Mark, can I borrow your shotgun? And I say, sure, but we have to go to a gun dealer and both go through background checks. You take my gun out for the weekend and go shooting, you come back with it. Before you can give it back to me, we have to go back through that process and pay the fee each time. This is foolishness, and it is not going to stop a criminal from getting a weapon. It is not going to reduce violence. Nothing about this is a good idea, and it's nothing more than an attempt to whittle away at the Second Amendment of our Constitution.
Congresswoman, is that too much of an ask to have a background check for a transfer like that?
We already have background checks in our state. This just closes a loophole on certain kinds of sales. Again, I think the American public feels very frustrated that we aren't doing more to deal with the issues of gun violence in this country. And absolutely, it will not solve every crime that's ever committed, and it won't change every situation, but it will in some. And who are we to stand back and say that shouldn't happen? Again, this will be decided by the voters of the state of Maine. We are a very engaged hunting state. People are out there enjoying the opportunity to get themselves a deer this year or go duck hunting. That's a big part of our state, but this does not restrict people from going hunting. The situation that you're describing is about loaning your gun to somebody else, not in your presence. If you and your friend go duck hunting together, you don't have to go get a background check. You don't have to do all those other things. But think about it. You don't just automatically loan anybody your car and not think that you're going to have an insurance liability. You don't hand over your prescription medications to everyone else. Think of all the situations that you have to think about. This is a gun. What if you don't know that your colleague at work or your friend has a protection from abuse order on them? How are you going to feel when you find out that they had access to your gun when they weren't able to buy one because you chose to do that?
We do have one more question about the guns.
This is so
10
ridiculous.
seconds. Go ahead.
This is so ridiculous to say it's going to be decided by the voters of the state of Maine. Your friend Michael Bloomberg is supporting this to the tune of $3 or $4 million. That is not a Maine effort.
Look, I want to say that the voters of Maine are extremely intelligent and they know what's on their mind. And this is one question. They're not going to be swayed by Michael Bloomberg if they don't agree with Michael Bloomberg, or they're not going to be swayed by the NRA, who's also putting a lot of money into this. So to say that the voters of Maine can't make up on their own minds on this or any other issue is completely unfair. Every campaign gets a lot of money spent on it, and people make perfectly good decisions in our state every time.
Background checks aside, according to MassShootingTracker.org, there have been more than 400 mass shootings in America in this calendar year alone. Some of those gunmen in the deadliest instances were not prohibited from buying firearms. Congresswoman Pingree, is there any way to stop that sort of carnage from happening over and over again in this country?
Well, as you can see from this dialogue, it's a constant challenge to figure out what's an appropriate question to ask. Who should we prohibit from owning a gun or not? And we aren't going to always know, unfortunately, who's going to shoot that gun in an appropriate way, or who's not going to handle it well, who's going to be angry on that day or misuse a gun. Sometimes people, and we've seen many of these instances in mass shootings, sometimes people are perfectly qualified to own that gun, yet what they do with it, whether it's shooting school children or coming into a crowded room or at their workplace, is horrendous, and we wish we could have had a way to stop it.
Dr. Holbrook?
In my work, one of the things I am tasked to do is assess violence risk. And I've got to tell you, no background check is going to do that. No friend handing someone a gun is going to be able to do that. The idea that we can prevent violence by restricting access to firearms is ridiculous. All we're going to do is make more victims. If we want to talk about gun violence, let's talk about pressure cooker violence or automobile violence, or let's talk about hammer violence. The gun, the pressure cooker, the hammer is the tool. It's the person behind the tool that is the problem. Restricting guns is only going to make more victims.
We've got about 10 minutes left and a lot of topics we still want to cover. Can we agree to 30 seconds each for the remaining ballot questions? Ballot question 4 has to do with Maine's minimum wage. Approving ballot question 4 would raise that wage to $12 an hour by the year 2020, and it would eliminate the tip credit. Dr. Holbrook, you say you will vote no on this question. What do you think the minimum wage should be in Maine? 30 seconds.
I think it should be governed by the free market economy. I think the government ought to stay the heck out of it.
Congresswoman, you're a yes vote on this. You own a small business. Does everybody at your small business make at least $12 an hour?
Absolutely. I think it's the right thing to do. I don't think that I don't think that it's fair to own a business and not make sure everybody gets paid the same wage or gets paid a living wage. I think that amounts to still at $12 an hour, barely a poverty wage, or maybe not taking yourself out of poverty. And one of the challenges today is, how do people make ends meet? If you have a small business and you don't pay people sufficient wages, it's just very difficult to make sure that they don't have to qualify for SNAP benefits, food stamps, Medicaid coverage on their health care. I mean, there's just so many things that we're asking somebody else to subsidize it, and that shouldn't happen.
Question 5 has to do with ranked choice voting. Should Maine institute ranked choice voting statewide? It would make us the first state to do so. Congresswoman, we saw in a recent Portland Press Herald poll, 20% of the people are still undecided on this. One of the arguments against it is it's too confusing. Is it?
I think it will be somewhat confusing, but again, I think we shouldn't underestimate the ability of Maine voters to make sure that they understand the issue and that they want to go ahead and do it. I think it would help us in those complicated races where we have more than 2 candidates running and people want to make sure that their voice is heard, even if the candidate they choose doesn't win. So I think it's a good idea, and I think Mainers will understand it in a very short period of time.
Dr. Holbrook, you are no on question 5. Would ranked choice voting make candidates try to appeal to more than just their base?
Excuse me, I don't know what it would do except make a big mess out of everything, and it violates Maine's Constitution, because Maine's Constitution says that the winner will be the plurality of the votes, not some mathematical shenanigans that goes on.
Okay. Our next question is about education, and it comes from a college student.
Hi, my name is Autumn Carey, and I live in North Yarmouth, Maine. I was wondering what you are going to do to make college more affordable.
And according to the Institute for College Access and Success, the average college student will graduate $30,000 in debt. We know a lot of people exceed that amount by tens of thousands of dollars. In Maine, the average debt for a 4-year degree is $29,000, so pretty close to the average. We'll start with you, Dr. Holbrook. How do you make college more affordable without putting people in crippling debt?
The first thing I'd do is not hire people like Elizabeth Warren at $350,000 to teach one class. That's the first thing I would do. We have to be able to bring the expenses down. Now, what is the right way to do it? I am not sure. There was a recent survey that was released about Ivy League schools sitting on $10–20 billion in their endowments, and yet their students are getting subsidized loans on the backs of the taxpayer. I think that ought to be looked at. If a college or university is that wealthy, maybe they ought to come up with a different student aid package other than the American taxpayer.
Congresswoman, how do you make college more affordable? You've been in Congress 8 years.
Well, one of the things is to continue to support Pell Grants. I think the majority of college students in the state of Maine at 4-year colleges, state universities, and community colleges are dependent on Pell Grants. We could enhance those, make sure there were more of them. I don't think that people should pay high interest rates on their college loans, and there have been a lot of proposals to reorganize that. I don't think the federal government should be earning money off the interest rates on college loans, which would make them much more affordable. The fact is, it's very hard to guarantee that you're going to have a job that covers the loans you're going to get out of college with today, and it means a lot of young people are making the decision to say, well, maybe I won't take that risk, or maybe my family can't help me take that risk. And that is not good for the state of Maine, where we frankly do have a shortage in certain careers like engineering. It's an expensive 4-year degree, but it guarantees a job most likely on the other side, and we need more engineers in our state.
We have about 5 minutes left in the debate. Our next question is from social media. Megan.
Paul, thank you. This question comes from Howard Sawyer. This was via Twitter. He says to both candidates, most Americans want term limits. Do you respectively favor them? And if so, will either of you create a law?
Congresswoman, I believe you're first.
I'm not in favor of term limits. I served in the state legislature under term limits. I actually was elected to serve in the legislature when term limits came in. So everyone I served with, I was there for 8 years. I don't think it's been a good thing for Maine. I don't think it's changed Maine in a positive way. I think that it's been a negative factor. It means that you elect somebody to serve your state legislative district, and in 8 years, whether you think they're the greatest person who ever served, whether they know the issues better than anyone else, they still have to leave. It's not up to the voters anymore, it's just this system. And the fact is that happens at the same time when lobbyists don't have a term limit, so they can be there for 25 years and know much more than the people that you elect. Staff members don't have term limits. I just don't think it's a balanced system, and I don't think it brings about the change that people kind of imagine it will when they just say, let's just throw all the bums out.
Dr. Holbrook.
I'm of two minds about that issue right at the moment. I like the idea of citizens having the power to say, this is a bum and we're getting rid of them, and they vote him out. I like that idea. But I also recognize that may be a bit idealistic. I truly believe in James Madison's idea of the citizen legislator. And you know, if we went to term limits, we certainly would be able to whittle down the ruling class in Washington I think pretty sufficiently. But intuitively, I kind of I bristle against the thought. But so I don't have an answer for the gentleman who sent in the question. I'm sorry.
We're coming up on the end of our time for the debate. I do want to ask you each, though. We'll start with Dr. Holbrook. You know, in this last week of campaigning, how do you convince somebody from the opposing party or somebody who doesn't line up with your ideals? If you maybe 30 seconds, Fred, on these questions.
That's real simple. Congresswoman Pingree has been in office now for 7 years, and I have to ask you, are you better off now than you were when she went in? The idea that we've brought no new jobs to the state of Maine, the idea that the GDP has remained virtually flat, the idea that she supports socialized medicine, the idea that she supports open borders and bringing more refugees in that we can't vet properly, I think ought to speak to most everyone's concerns in the district about the economy, about illegal drugs, about illegal immigration, and where we want the country to go.
Congresswoman, I think you get the final word.
The final word.
How do you convince Republicans that Shelley Pingree deserves a 5th term?
Well, I worked very hard to work across the aisle, so I have a lot of Republican colleagues that I work with, and I want people to understand that it's not always as partisan as it looks like from the outside. I've just had a visit from the member of Congress from Alaska, the longest serving Republican in the House, to come here to the state of Maine to talk about how we're going to deal with issues like sea level rising and global warming and some of the challenges that our fishermen are facing right here. I've worked very hard to bring jobs to Maine. I serve on the Agricultural Appropriations Committee. I got 30 pieces of legislation included into the Farm Bill. And there are things like value-added producer grants, supports for farmers during this difficult drought. We've seen more farmers be able to start up farms, more young people get into farming today. That's a huge boost to our rural economy. I got to stop, I can tell, because you're going to make me stop, but I could go on for a long time.
Thank you both for participating in our debate. Thank you for disagreeing without being disagreeable. That concludes our debate. We want to thank the Westbrook Performing Arts Center here at Westbrook Middle School for hosting us. We've had a good night. Thank you to our participants once again. Thanks to our audience here, and thanks for remaining quiet. Thanks to you at home for watching. During the next 2 days, we'll be bringing you issues debates about question 1, marijuana, question 3, background checks, question 4, minimum wage. They will air the next 2 evenings. We hope you tune in to check those out, and we hope you'll tune in to Channel 8 for coverage over the next week and beyond as we continue to cover this race, CD2 up north, a very contested congressional race, and all of the issues that will be on the ballot on Election Day. Please vote November 8th. Thanks for watching. Good night.